this for you. I don't want you to hurt, so I'll give you this hope.
Hey everybody! Welcome to Freedom Friday, where you learn how to free yourself and live your dreams. I'm Darienne from DariAwakened.com, and today I want to talk about my experience and what I learned from my own addictions. Now, if you haven't been following my website, if you don't know very much about me, I suffered from a few addictions in my lifetime. When I was a teenager, I was addicted to ecstasy. Throughout most of my adolescent into adult life, I was addicted to self-harm, cutting myself, and other things like that. And I later, as an adult, this is when my big crash came and I hit rock bottom and then found my spirituality. This was, I guess, the moment before my salvation. I became addicted to alcohol and the party life. I smoked cigarettes from like age 13 to 24, faithfully. So I've experienced many addictions. I also come from a family on either side of my family, my mother and father. There are addicts on either side, and mental illness, which is another thing that I suffered from. And I really believe that depression is an addiction. And so this is what I'm going to go into. The very first thing I learned about addiction to anything is that it's not the drug, it's not the alcohol. It has nothing to do with what you're perceived to be addicted to. I've worked, if some of you know me, I've been on Aquanet Radio, where I did the Clean and Serene radio show. I've worked very closely with a lot of addicts. I've been an addict myself. I pretty much got this down. And I know that there are different types of addictions, but it's not the addiction, and it's not what you're addicted to. I think that that's the most important thing that I learned when it came to my addictions. The second thing that I learned is that there is something about an addict or someone with an addictive personality. There's something about that person that intuitively or instinctively knows that there is better than this. And that is why we as addicts will chase this something greater. And you know what? I'm not even going to say we as addicts, because I don't consider myself an addict anymore. For my own personal belief system, I don't believe in continuing to call myself an addict, an alcoholic, a drug addict. I just don't. I don't want to carry that with me. I refuse to. I will not let that define me. And if you feel called to, I would suggest you do the same. If you're in any kind of program, I know that the 12-step program, which I've never done, I have read into the book and didn't really relate to it. I didn't feel like it was really going to help me at the time. I did get sober when I started reading it, but not because of that book. I started reading it. I read other books that helped me in my own way, but I know that they say that you're supposed to say I'm an alcoholic, and I get that. I get why. But there's this level of mistrust for yourself in that I don't really like, and I'm going off on a tangent right now, so I'm going to pull myself back in. But what I learned, and I think is so magnificent about a person chasing addictions, is that there is something within you that knows that there is greater than this. And so we chase this high. I mean, for me, something like ecstasy, I mean, it was like heaven on earth, you know? And I don't want to glorify that drug because it caused a lot of issues for me. But while I was high, I was like in heaven. And I, in my spiritual practice, have been able to find much greater than that, sober and connecting with God. But even Deepak Chopra has said, drugs will take your mind to this ecstasy and this euphoria. And that is the closest you will get to God by taking this drug without actually bringing God into your life. But I think that it's this beautiful thing, and I think that addicts get this really bad rap that I mean, we all know addicts get a bad rap, that they're just these awful, terrible people, and they're like living in the gutter, and they'll do anything for these drugs, and they're like low-class citizens, you know? The addicts really get this bad rap, but the truth is that in my experience, if you compare an addict to someone who's just living this monotonous life and doesn't know any better and is just okay with being okay and doesn't have this calling within them saying that there is something so much better than this out there and you are not following it, they don't have that burning desire inside of them. If you compare that to an addict who is here in this world and just knows that there is so much better than this, that the world that I see is hell compared to what I intuitively know is better. That to me is that call. That's just God calling. And what an addict does is we make the mistake of saying, oh, is God in this drug? Is God in this line I'm about to snort? Because that's the closest I've ever been to God. Is God in sex? Is God in this partying? Is God in, and then we're just constantly looking for God. And this, again, is my own personal experience, but a lot of the addicts that I've spoken to have had the same kind of experience where we're just chasing God. But the wonderful thing about that is that we know that there is God. We may not know how to articulate that. We may not know that that's exactly what we're looking for. But that euphoria, that feeling of heaven on earth, that's what we're chasing in God. And then what happens is this. When we're trying to break away from those addictions and those habits, and this is where I can really talk about how depression was such an addiction for me, is that we've now learned how to cope with our emotions that we can't deal with and hardships with this addiction. So it's really an addiction, in my experience, has just been coping skills. Terrible, terrible coping skills. Completely unhealthy, awful, terrible coping skills that just put me in a downward spiral and just create more unhealthy things for me to have to learn to cope with. So our subconscious says, like for me, even yesterday I caught myself, my body's been kind of a little bit under the weather, and so I've been sleeping a lot more, and because my subconscious still says, oh, I'm sleeping, now I'm going to go into depression because that's how I cope with this. Because I haven't been doing what I love to do because I've just been in bed and I'm beating myself up or whatever. The ego mind and that subconscious is so programmed to go into depression, addiction, whatever your addiction may be, even if it's work, because I have a little bit of a working addiction. Workaholic, anything, shopping, whatever. My brain started to go, oh, I just want to lay in bed and sink into depression because that's how I cope with things. And I had to go, whoa, hey, I see you there, but I'm not going to pay attention to you. I'm going to go do something else because that's just old crap that I don't need to believe in anymore. And that's kind of the process of the addict coming into recovery, is separating yourself from those old ways of coping. And we coped with drugs and alcohol and sex and, serial monogamy and partying and working and shopping. And that's how we've learned to cope with things. So it's really just a coping mechanism, addiction. And it's really just a coping mechanism for that deep call that God is whispering within you and then burning within you. And you're just like, you don't know it's God. You're like, God, I hear you. You don't know it's God, but you're like, I hear you. And I'm trying to find you. And I think you're in this heroin, or I think you're in this ecstasy, or in this bed with this man, or I think, and you experience that euphoria, but then it's gone. And then we continue to go, oh, well, it must be somewhere else. And then we go back to our lives where there's, okay, some explosion happens in our lives, or our lives are so terrible because we've been doing drugs so much, you know. And then we go, oh my God, the only way I know how to deal with this is through drugs or through my addiction. And it's not consciously. It is subconsciously. It is, you have to understand that the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is the robot within us. It's just running, right? It's just going. It's like that robot mind that is programmed. And it takes repetition, right? It takes repetition. It's like learning how to, if you were to learn how to do everything with your left hand, if you've been right-handed your whole life, your instinct would be to use your right hand. But eventually, you could learn how to write with your left hand if you train your brain to do it. It's just in that repetition. And we're so used to doing it one way that we don't know. So that's kind of in a nutshell some pointers about what I've learned about my addiction. I could literally write an entire book about what I've learned with my addictions, because my addictions include all of those things: sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and depression, and everything that comes with it, you know? And what I've learned in my recovery, which is even more magnificent than my addiction. So I wanted to point that out because I think that, I know that addicts get such a bad rap, that we're like, you know, scum of the earth. But the truth is there's a calling. God is calling within us. And it's that calling that we are so blessed. So it's like maybe addicts are a lot more connected to God than they think, you know? So use that. Be grateful. If you have that call, right? Maybe you're craving your addiction. Stop for a minute and give thanks for that craving for God within you. Say, thank you for showing me that I just need God. Or thank you, God, for just continuing to call upon me. And maybe I'm going the wrong way, and maybe you can help me to find where you really are, because God is within. I can tell you that much. And I would say just give thanks. When you have a craving, don't hate yourself for it. And don't hate the person that you love that is having these addictive cravings. Don't hate them either. You give thanks for them, because it's just God calling you and you not quite knowing which way to find Him. And that's okay. So I wish you many, many blessings, and I congratulate you for realizing, if you've realized your addictions. And if you've maybe by listening this are hearing that call from God. And it doesn't have to be God. It can be the universe. It can be that inspiration within you. Whatever you call God. My definition of God is not the religious one. So it's just that burning within you. And I invite you to listen to that burning within you and thank that burning within you. Give thanks for that burning within you. Give thanks for your addictions, because that is God calling you to something greater. And you know in you that there is something greater. So I congratulate you for knowing that there's something greater. I love you all. Thank you so much. Please, if you have any experiences you'd like to share, any questions, anything, please let me know in the comments below on DariaAwakened.com, below this post. And find me on any social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Daria Awakened. And I'll see you guys next time.